This is my splash practice for today, and it's using Brushos which I've already mixed up with some water. You can use them as crystals, but they're a bit unpredictable, and these are the selection that I'll use. I'll put those in the comments. So I'm going to also incorporate a few acrylic inks as well, which will be interesting. So here I've actually drawn out a rough sort of abstract poppy picture, which I'm now going to start working on, just wetting one of these panels that I've actually drawn, and then adding in, this is a sandstone colour of Brusho, and it's absolutely beautiful, as you can see. It's quite vivid, and it's nice that you put it into a wet in wet rather than a dry, because it loosens down the colour, stops it being quite so strong. So I'm adding in a little bit of the lovely yellow as well, because I want a bit of an autumn feel for this painting that's going to have poppies on it. This really is just to show you how you can use Brushos in the diluted form. I'm not going to use them as the sprinkled crystals in this piece. I just want to use them as the washes and show you how vibrant they can be. So really less is more. If in doubt, add more moisture. And in this corner I'm going to add a little bit of moss green mixed up, which is a really pretty colour. And as they spread, you actually start to see different colours within them that have been made to create the different colours. So here I have my first poppy shape. It is a very, very loose abstract form. These are not botanically drawn by any means. This is just to suggest the shape. And I'm going in with some really nice brilliant red. Again, wet in wet. Drop the colour in at the base and watch it spread. You can move it around with a good watercolour brush, exactly as you would normal watercolours. It's just that these are slightly different in their vibrancy and the way that they move. They stain quite well, so as soon as they've actually dried, they leave a stain. You can remove it slightly, but it's quite difficult. So sometimes you have to work a little bit quickly with these, and it is a bit of an acquired thing to get used to them. So I'm dropping in a little bit of deeper red here. Again, just building up loose stages, just being able to add in the colour, drop it in wet, and build up that loose shape. It's going to start to run into the colour from the yellow that we've already put in, but I don't mind that. I want that sort of softness going on here. So this is also a good exercise for practicing using plenty of water to brush out your colours to get a little bit looser finish. You can add in detail, but you can also keep it nice and loose. And again, pulling with clean water just to get those little bits of bleeds going of colour adds a lot of interest to your painting, stops them being hard edges and adds in lots of softness. So pulling down to that stem with the green mix again, you can already see the colour of the water. It requires changing quite often with Brusho, so you will find yourself having to stop and change your water. And I'm dropping in some of the watercolour inks, which I've also decided to incorporate to see how they work together. So this is a really nice bronze green colour. And now, while it's still damp, rather than very wet, I'm dropping in an even deeper red colour at the base of this poppy. It's already starting to form shapes. And down to the bottom here, I've actually started to add in a mixture of green and the sandstone, and also adding in a little bit of a blue colour, which just adds a little bit of extra interest here. This is a sort of mid-blue watercolour ink. I'm pulling it out. You can see how the Brusho is moving, and it's dried quite quickly there, so I'm just going to drop a little bit more into that wettened area. It spreads really well through that water, through the already wet inks and water that we've put on. And you can make this as dark as you want. Obviously the blue adds depth to it, which is great. And now, just using a bit of water, I'm going to pull that green up there. I know that I've got a stem there and another poppy, small sort of bud shape. So I'm just taking out a little bit of that colour. Don't be afraid to remove paint as well as add it in. That's the best way to get your soft lines. Plenty of water, clean water. Dry your brush if you have to, and lift. And now you can see we've moved to sort of the mid-ground here. And again, I'm just adding clean water, ready to drop the colour in and this is the watercolour ink, a lovely sort of bronzy green. I'm pulling it out following the line of that stem. So it all looks very disjointed at present, but hopefully you will see that it does come together as time goes on. Again, wetting, 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 pulling that colour, softening those edges, always looking out where it might be drying and then pulling it. Some interesting colours going on in the bottom panel where things have merged together and made their own sort of colours. And this is why your splash practice is so useful, because if you don't like those colours at the splash practice, you're not going to like them on the final painting. Better to use a small piece than to do the whole thing and discover you don't like it. Now I'm going to drop in this dark green into the base of the bud here, and I don't mind it spreading into the water around it because I want this to be quite dark. So I'm just again going to just soften that out, pull with the water, take it up and out, always moving away from you, away from where you've placed the inks or the paints. Now I'm adding the red straight in here so that it mixes with that green at the base and is a lot more realistic and natural than a harsh line where we add petals and little bits and pieces. And that's where the next poppy is. I have already wet it, and just like the first one, I'm dropping in the brilliant red Brusho, letting it move out through that water. I have a stem going across there, so I'm working either side of it. You may have to wait for some areas to dry. As with all watercolours, you can't do complete sort of washes in the first go. You've got to wait for certain areas to dry. But I'm washing that out again, softening, pulling, making those edges. Use that water, keep it moving. Like I said, this is not a botanical study. They may look more like tulips, I don't know at the end. But the technique is here for you to have a look at. And again, I've dropped in deeper colour and I've just used water to pull that out and make it bleed a little bit. Now I'm going in with the green, which is on the other side as well, so that we've got a little bit of continuity along the side of that stem. Softening it down. Always using your water, always watching for places where it's drying so that you can soften them. Now I'm going to use this lovely dark green to go around this sort of seed head that I've put into that panel on that top right hand corner, and hopefully that will stand out. So I'm just doing some little rough crinkly bits where you have like a seed head top. And put some of that lovely yellow that we started on the left hand side with. It's a lovely cheerful yellow, very autumnal. A little bit of green got into that, but I don't mind actually, that adds a little bit more depth. So I'm just keeping to the lines that I've drawn really, just to give a rough sort of panel. I will go over that later on. A little bit of the green but softened down. And again, just using the water, use a tissue if you need to. And I'm going back here where it's dried, and I'm just using a fine rigger brush, the dark green, back down to make the stem. Now you'll notice I've left a white sort of margin, and I'm actually going to leave that white margin because I want that to stand out. Instead of using masking fluid, I've actually just left a negative space in effect, and that will make the dark green stem look brighter. I'm just adding in little touches here and there now. I'm bringing that stem down from the seed head. It's definitely starting to look a lot more of a composition now. We're getting different shades going on. And I'm just going to bring that down, and I'm going to, I think, stop that at that line there that we've built, that block at the bottom. Softening that down a little bit. Now I'm going to add in a very rough shape of a leaf. This is just literally, I made it up as I went along, just wet a rough leaf shape. And I think poppy leaves have a little bit of sort of teeth on the edges, so I'm just going to put little bits of rough edges on this leaf rather than a smooth one. And again, I'm just dropping in the Brusho mix into the water. And now I'm using the dark green up here at the top. I think you're beginning to get the idea by now about adding in these little stems and things. You get the darker shades going on, and it starts to add that interest. And now into the wet area here, I'm actually going to add some of the blue ink, and that just gives that lovely little bit of shadow underneath that stem onto that poppy that is behind it. And the blue mixed with the red make a nice deep colour, and I like that. It just adds that little bit of shadow there and gives it a little bit more depth and reality. Again, always softening with the water. Now I'm just going to add in again a little bit more deeper red here at the base of this poppy, sort of on the underside of that. So I'm just adding in and wetting and pulling that out, and it's blending in really nicely. Now I'm not so keen on this side. I'm not happy with the shape I've formed, so I'm going in with the white acrylic ink over the top of this poppy, and it's softened it down quite a lot. I will come back to that, I think, afterwards when I've had an assessment. And this is another of the stems that's going in of that big central poppy. Again, using the same green and just keeping it moving down. And I'm going to add some leaf shapes here as well. So I'm just literally pulling out the colour upwards and just dragging it into a rough sort of loose shape that looks a little bit like a leaf. A little bit darker under there, going into the cup of the flower and softening that through. Now I'm going to go back in and add some of that beautiful blue watercolour ink to the top of this panel. Remember, we've got the yellow at the bottom, but it's now dried, so we can go in without worrying that it's going to go green. So I've just popped it into that top right hand corner, and I'm just wetting and pulling that colour down, and that's looking very pretty now. So here we have the final design, and as you can see, everything is dried. All the flow has happened. We've got lots of little bits of interest. I've added some extra leaves, some little bits of tendrils that come up just to break up some of the areas. And I've actually gone over the drawn lines that I made to make these panels with this Gold Posca pen. It's permanent, and it just neatens that edges off. It just gives a little bit of an Art Deco type feel. And I'm very pleased with the autumn essence of this picture. I've done a little bit of spattering as well, just to break up the spaces, and I hope you've enjoyed watching how you can use Brusho to make something like this. If you've enjoyed it, please don't forget to hit the usual buttons, the like and the subscribe, and I will come back and do a few more of these and show you different ways of using Brusho in other ways.